being a professor of anatomic and forensic pathology at Midland State University.
Thank you, doctor. Now that we know a little bit more about you, can you start by telling us what you do as a medical examiner?
I perform autopsies to determine the time and cause of a victim's death.
Can you tell the jury what an autopsy typically entails?
Of course. An autopsy entails an internal and an external examination. In the internal examination, we look for any abnormalities in the organs of the lungs or any bone fractures. In the external examination, we look for any present wounds or bruising that may indicate why a victim died.
And did you perform an autopsy in today's case?
I did, yes.
And doctor, what kind of materials do you need to perform an autopsy?
Well, you need the medical records, you need to be able to visit the scene where the body was found, and you need the body, of course.
And did you have all those materials with you?
I did, yes, fortunately.
And doctor, did you reliably apply the autopsy method to today's case?
I did. It's standard practice in all medical examiners' offices, and it's really the gold standard for how to determine the cause of death.
Thank you, doctor. Now let's talk about the time that Parker Page died. How do you determine the time of death of a victim?
It's a three-step process, really. So first, you use the standard heat loss formula to corroborate and confirm those results. You use the rigor mortis and liver mortis processes of the body.
Doctor, I want to take those 3 steps in part. Can you start by talking about your heat loss formula?
Of course. So it takes the standard living temperature of a normal body and compares that to the core body temperature when you found the body. In this case, Parker Page's core body temperature was about 20 degrees Celsius, or, I'm sorry, for the Americans, 68.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And then you take that and compare it to 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, plug those into the equation, they work backwards, and you get your time of death.
How were you able to corroborate those results?
I compared them to the rigor mortis and liver mortis of the body.
So taking into account those 3 methods, when did you determine that Parker Page died?
Taking into account all these steps, I concluded that the victim died between 4 and 6 p.m. on Saturday, July 14th, 2018.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper expert testimony may I be heard.
Yes.
Under Rule 702, Prong C, it's the defense's contention that this witness has not laid the proper foundation as to the reliability of the method she used, the formula specifically for heat loss to calculate time of death.
Can you lay the foundation for that?
Yes, Your Honor. I actually do believe that Dr. Quincy has laid that foundation. Pursuant to Tarot Readers Association of Midlands v. Merrill Dow, in determining the reliability under 702C, as opposing counsel mentioned, it is up to the judge to determine whether her methods can be tested or has been tested, or whether it has been subjected to peer review and publication, whether it has a known error rate, and whether it has gained widespread acceptance in her field. And although all those factors are relevant, that list is not necessarily dispositive. Dr. Quincy said that her methods are the gold standard and widely accepted in her field throughout the medical examiners. We have met 2 of those products, Your Honor.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
The witness has testified to the reliability of other methods she used, including the internal and external examination, but not for this method of calculating heat loss. They have not laid any foundation for this formula, whether it has a known error rate, whether it has gained widespread acceptance, or any of the other methods for verification listed in Tarot Readers versus Merrill Dow.
I have no doubt you'll address those matters on your cross-examination. Your objection is overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. All right, Doctor, now that we know that Parker Page died between 4 and 6 p.m., can you start by telling us how she died?
Of course. So I concluded that the victim was struck in her left clavicle with a hiking staff, with enough force to push her off of a 40-foot cliff, where she immediately died due to the blunt force trauma to the head.
And Doctor, when we were discussing this earlier, you actually showed me a diagram. Do you think it'll be helpful to the jury to show them the same?
Of course, I use diagrams in class. It really simplifies things for my students.
Yes, Doctor. Now, may Dr. Quincy step down and make use of a diagram?
Of course.
All right, Doctor, I have your diagram in front of us. Can you start by telling us what we're looking at here?
Of course. So this is a diagram of the human body, specifically a diagram that mimics the injury sustained on the victim's body at the time of her death.
And what do the injuries to the victim's right side tell you?
The injuries on the victim's right side are symptomatic of the injuries you would sustain if you fell off of a 40-foot cliff. They're jagged, all located on one side of the body, and they're very bloody.
And Doctor, did you ever get the chance to uncover any fractures to the victim's left side?
I did. I noted a singular fracture contralateral, which means on the opposite side of the body, to the other injuries, and that was located at the left collarbone.
Did you determine that that fracture was a result of the fall?
I concluded it was not. Due to its peculiar location, as well as many other factors, I determined that this bruise was caused from a different source of trauma.
Right, Doctor, so other than the unusual location of this fracture, was there anything else that indicated to you that it was not sustained during the fall?
There was. Unlike the injuries on the right side, this one was well-defined, lacked blood, and was on the opposite side.
And is it common to find a bruise that well defined?
It is not. You see, in this peculiar case, the victim had a genetic condition known as osteogenesis imperfecta, or in layman's terms, brittle bone disease. This means that this individual had skin hyperlaxity, which means that whatever causes a bruise, the skin takes that shape. In this case, it actually helps me more correctly identify the cause of bruises.
So what were the exact dimensions of that bruise?
I'm going to put up a little sticky here that says the dimensions of the bruise measured 2.25 centimeters in length and 1.125 centimeters in width.
Doctor, were you ever able to determine what caused that bruise?
I was. A few days later, the Detective Chesney, provided me with a number of items found at the campsite. From there, I was able to determine a hiking staff matched this bruise.
Would you recognize that hiking staff if I were to show it to you?
I would, yes.
Your Honor, may I approach this witness with the hiking staff?
Yes.
Approaching the witness. All right, Doctor, I just handed you the hiking staff. Is that the same hiking staff that the detective provided you with?
Yes, it is.
It hasn't been changed or altered in any way?
No.
All right, Doctor, so how similar is that hiking staff and this bruise?
I'm actually going to put a sign here, if you could hold this. But the hiking stick measured 2.25 centimeters in length and 1.125 centimeters in width. They were an exact match down to 1,000th of a centimeter, which is about the width of a piece of paper.
Doctor, I'm looking at the hiking staff now, and isn't the capped end a full circle and not a half circle like this bruise?
That's correct. You're very observant. I think you do well in medical school, but that's because I concluded the victim was struck at an angle, which is why only half of a circle imprinted on her body.
All right, Doctor, so taking into account the time and cause of death of the victim, what were your overall conclusions in today's case?
I concluded that on Saturday, July 14th, between 4 and 6 p.m., the victim was struck with this hiking staff with enough force to push her off of a 40-foot cliff, where she immediately died due to the impact of the fall.
And did you make any other conclusions today?
I did. I was able to rule out accidental, natural, and environmental causes for death. This death is a homicide.
Thank you, Doctor. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Cross-examination?
Yes.
May I proceed?
Please.
Good morning, Dr. Quincy.
Hello.
Now, I'd like to talk about something you mentioned on direct examination regarding your formula that you used for heat loss.
Sure.
So you didn't take into consideration Parker's brittle bone disease using this equation, right?
That's correct. The standard formula actually accounts for people with normal living conditions, and brittle bone disease wasn't that severe in this case, so it wasn't necessary to include that.
Right. And you didn't take into consideration Parker's age either when using this equation?
Parker was a normal human, and the formula accounts for people in normal human. It doesn't matter your age.
And you also didn't take into consideration her below average height and weight when using this equation.
Like I said, she's a child and she's still normal and average. She was about 10 pounds underweight, which is nothing severe. She was just on the lower spectrum.
But her height and weight were both below average, right?
Average, sure, but that doesn't necessarily affect the time of death.
Next, Dr. Quincy, I'd like to talk about some of Parker's respiratory issues.
Sure.
Now, Parker was diagnosed with asthma, correct?
Yes, she had asthma.
And asthma makes it harder for someone to breathe when exposed to certain irritants, right?
On some occasions it does. It's only when you're having a flare-up though.
Yes, and flare-ups can be caused by exposure to things like pollen or dust, right?
Potentially. It actually depends on the person what causes the for me, it's cedar.
Right, and Parker was also diagnosed with OI, as you just mentioned.
That's right. She had type 1, the least severe type.
And people with OI also tend to suffer respiratory issues, right?
They can on occasion, yes.
And Parker, you found had pneumonia, right?
She had been diagnosed with pneumonia in the months leading up to her death, but she'd been treated for it and was cleared.
Right, and she had also been diagnosed with bronchitis, right?
Exactly, she'd been treated for it and had no longer had it.
And when you examined her body, you found abnormal amounts of pulmonary collagen in her lungs, right?
That's right, I actually found abnormal, yes, I did find that.
And abnormal amounts of pulmonary collagen in the lungs is what causes those respiratory issues in individuals with OI. Isn't that right?
Not necessarily all the time. Sometimes an individual can have abnormally low amounts of pulmonary collagen. It means it's actually easier for them to breathe.
But in individuals with OI, it is that abnormal amount of pulmonary collagen that affects their respiratory issues, right?
Not always, it depends on the case.
Now, Dr. Quincy, you'd agree with me that someone suffering from both OI and asthma would have significant respiratory issues, right?
Not necessarily, and especially in this case. You see, Parker had the least severe type of OI, which means her respiratory issues weren't that bad. And I saw no indications of an asthmatic flare-up on the day of her death.
But Dr. Quincy, you just mentioned that Parker had been diagnosed with pneumonia and bronchitis. Those are issues of the lungs, correct?
That's right, and on the day she died, she wasn't suffering from these incidents. She had actually had them in the months leading up to her death.
But someone who had been suffering respiratory issues, it would make it harder for oxygen to get to their brain, right?
Not necessarily, and especially not in this case.
Someone having trouble breathing would have trouble getting oxygen into their body, right?
If you were having trouble breathing, of course, you'd have difficulty getting oxygen into your body, but Parker Page did not have that.
I'm just asking about this medical theory, doctor. So if someone is having trouble getting oxygen into their body, they're not getting enough oxygen to their brain, right?
Sure.
And if someone doesn't have enough oxygen in their brain, it can affect their motor coordination, right?
It really depends on the individual. I can't give you a blanketed statement because science really depends, and the medical field really depends on each particular person. So I couldn't tell you exactly.
Dr. Quincy, I'm just asking for a yes or no if it's possible that these things could happen. Is it possible someone who doesn't have enough oxygen in their brain could affect their motor coordination?
Well, you see, I can't necessarily give you a yes or no answer because every person is different. But if someone wasn't getting enough oxygen to their brain, it could affect them.
All right, and if someone's motor coordination is impaired, it could make them more likely to trip or stumble, right?
It would depend on the person, really.
And these respiratory issues that I mentioned earlier, those can flare up while doing a strenuous activity.
Like I said, it depends on the person, where the person is, and who they are, and how bad their asthma is, really.
Dr. Quincy, again, I'm just asking if it's possible. Is that a yes?
Really, anything's possible, but it depends on the person and the circumstances they're in. I'm sorry, I can't give you a blanket answer.
All right, Dr. Quincy. Next, let's go on to talk about the initial conclusion you made regarding Parker Page's death.
All right.
So your initial report was inconclusive, right?
That's incorrect. It was inconclusive as if it was a homicide or an accident. I'd already ruled out environmental and natural causes of death.
Right, so it was inconclusive.
Sure.
And you, like you said, it was either homicidal or accidental.
That's correct.
And in that initial report, you mentioned a bruise that you found on Parker Page's clavicle, right?
That's right. That's why I was initially inconclusive, because I didn't have an answer to what caused that bruise. It wasn't until I was provided those items that I was able to match the hiking stick and conclude this was a homicide.
That's right, Dr. Quincy. In that initial report, you offered a few explanations for that bruise, right?
That's right.
You suggested it may have happened at the time of death,
Right.
may have happened before her death.
Right.
And in fact, you thought that this bruise could have gotten there in a completely separate, unrelated incident from her death, right?
That's right. I said it was possible this was an isolated event. However, upon reviewing the hiking stick, I concluded that it was caused by that.
Exactly. That wasn't the conclusion you made. Isn't that right?
No, I did conclude that the hiking stick was the cause of the bruise.
You didn't conclude, to clarify my question, you didn't conclude that it was a separate, unrelated incident, although you initially ruled that this was entirely possible.
That's right. I thought it was possible until I was provided more evidence to conclude that it was not.
And between your initial report and your addendum, just to make this very clear, you didn't discover any new injuries on Parker's body?
No, I completed a thorough autopsy and I just met with the detective later.
You didn't discover any new information about her medical history?
No, at the time of my autopsy, I was given all relevant information, all medical records, and I had access to the victim's body. In all cases,